Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, your guide to motorsports sponsorship. Here's your host, Josh Weesey.
Welcome to the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by AMSOIL. Today, we are actually featuring Kevin Kastner, the racing and events manager of AMSOIL. So I don't even need to tell you much about AMSOIL, which is normally what I start off with, because we're going to talk about it for a lot of the episode. But I do need to tell you a few other things before we actually get into this show. So one of them is, if you are listening using iTunes, it would be phenomenal for you to go over to the rating and review section for the show and leave one. Whatever podcast player you use, go ahead and subscribe. That way you don't miss upcoming guests. But this is just crucial for the growth, the survival, the thriving for the show, is those ratings and reviews. So please take a minute and go ahead and do that. All right, if you've never listened to the show before, the reason why it exists, we are trying to prepare you to build a successful motorsports sponsorship program. So if you don't get what you need out of this show, I guarantee we have covered it in the last 139 episodes leading up to this one. Really good content, lots of amazing guests that have come on here, so please, please, please take advantage of this free information and make changes to your sponsorship program as a result. All right, next thing I want to do is just cover a few of the other businesses who have been supporters for the show and help make it feasible, make it possible, allow it to exist. SolderWeld, they produce game-changing metal bonding technology. TopToPodium.com, they're experts in motorsports sponsorship. Bold Racing, they're a family race team and GSP XTV axle specialist. And then Crash Act Industries, they provide human protection and extreme racing products. I also want to shout out some of our other partners, including MBRP, HMK USA, Studboy Traction, and of course, GSP XTV. Without further ado, let's hop in. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by AMSOIL. And that's actually the perfect introduction here for our featured guest today. So Kevin Kastner is on. He's the racing and events manager at AMSOIL. But Kevin, I'm going to let you take it from here. Fill in some of the gaps in the intro. Tell us a little bit more about you.
Sure. Well, I guess I give you the kind of current profile of what I do at AMSOIL, and then maybe we can work backwards from there.
I like it.
But in my current capacity, I'm the, as the title probably explains fairly well, racing and events manager. But really, that's become an event marketing role. Mm-hmm. So I manage upwards of about 60% of the entire marketing budget for AMSOIL, and primarily focused on sponsorships, event marketing, trade shows, influencers, and of course integrating with the rest of the marketing team, through social media, through traditional advertising, and all those other mediums. So, kind of trying to bring the fun to AMSOIL. We're the face of the brand from an excitement standpoint, from the how you might recognize us in racing, how you might recognize us in some of the events and activities that we get involved. That's my role. So I manage a small team of people activating on events and our sponsorships, and that's kind of what I do today. And I've been at AMSOIL now for just about 2 years.
Perfect. And Lindsay Primo is on your team, correct?
That's correct. Yeah, Lindsay is she's been there for quite a few years and preceded my time there.
Perfect. So she was on oh goodness, I forgot what number it was. It was the Heydays episode. I think it might have been episode 105. Lindsay was on the show, and she also had a guest blog post on our website, which is still up right now. So if people want to know more about Lindsay and her role, you can go back to episode 105, listen to that, or check out her blog post on sponsoredriderclubpodcast.com. But I just want to quick plug Lindsay there. But yeah, keep going.
Sure. So I guess, what did I do before AMSOIL? I have kind of an interesting and very diverse background that brought me to where I am today. Prior to that, I was the executive director, which is essentially CEO and director of marketing and janitor and everything else for a little known snowmobile race in Alaska called the Iron Dog, which is the world's longest, toughest snowmobile race, which, funnily enough, is going on right now.
Yeah, right now.
We're recording this. Yeah. So, in fact, I think I haven't checked the map today, but I think they're probably arriving into Nome. Your leaders are probably making it to the halfway point right about now. So I ran that event for 7 years, and that was really my first foray into motorsports specifically, in sort of any management role or any director role around motorsports marketing. And I did that for 7 years. That was a very crazy, interesting, fun, challenging role. And on the surface, I think folks who aren't familiar with this type of work, you might think, oh, well, it's just one event a year. It can't be that big of a deal. But there's so much nuance and so much politics and so much fundraising and permitting and insurance and the list goes on and on. But for 7 years, I ran that event. When I first found Iron Dog, it had gone through a rough spell, had gone through a big shakeup. And when I first started, they had about $12,000 to their name, so they could barely make payroll.
Right.
And pretty much every sponsor that was involved was angry with the organization, wanted nothing to do with the organization. So I had to basically, and I came on in July, and the race starts in February. So I had just a very short number of months where basically I had to put the resuscitation on this event, convince everybody that it was worth reinvesting in, and bring it back to life. And so in my time there, I took it from barely alive to several firsts of live broadcast television, NBC sports specials, rerouting the race and the event through military bases and across ports, adding new additions. I brought X Games medalists to Anchorage, downtown Anchorage. We put on freestyle shows, bringing more sponsorship to the event, bringing more media to the event, leveraging the relationships with the communities, really working with the cities, towns, and volunteers. So that was really the most formative part of my career in recent times that translated well to AMSOIL. And so we're kind of going in reverse here, but
yeah.
I think one of the interesting pieces about the connection between, why am I at AMSOIL? I think some people have asked that question, what brought you to, the middle of nowhere in northern Wisconsin / north of the wall. And it really boils down to that I also have a personal interest. I think that happens a lot of times. I'm sure you run into this with obviously your athletes that are super excited about what they're into. And then people in my role tend to have a background of interest in, whether it be downhill skiing or skateboarding or motorsports or, autocrossing or anything that they just get into. And I've always had a deep interest in automotive, but being in Alaska, it's a kind of market. It's difficult to have this kind of role. There's just not very many brands or things that are based out of Alaska. So that's what brought me to AMSOIL, is that I love the diversity. We're into everything. So while I enjoyed the Iron Dog and really enjoyed all the things I learned about specifically the motorsport side of it, AMSOIL is a much broader palette to paint on with, snowmobile, dirt bike, off-road racing, Jeep influencers, drifting, rally racing, diesel truck events, it goes on and on. So, and I'm a glutton for punishment. I love a challenge and a diamond in the rough, and I love, constantly pushing and, improving. So that's what brought me to AMSOIL. And I don't know how far back you want to go, but I've got a pretty wide spectrum of experience going back to telecom, finance. My original sort of professional career started out in .com. I worked for a credit union and launched the first ever website for a credit union in like the late 90s. I've owned my own businesses. I've owned my own web businesses. I've owned everything from a website called dogsled.com that's now since gone away, but that was a whole mushing community website, live streaming the Iditarod before they even had a website. I was doing live streaming video This really dates me, but this was like the Zing MPEG video player, which predated real video, which predated everything else that we currently have today.
Yeah.
Doing crazy stuff, pushing the envelope, even in my mid-20s, of live broadcasts over satellite phones, being married up with a radio station and being live streamed, and having live chats real time with people across the globe, with a reporter standing outside at 30 below in McGrath, Alaska, filling in details and answering questions about a dog mushing team.
Yeah.
So I've got this really bizarre history of starting out primarily in publishing and design as a little kid. My grandfather owned a printing company, and then all the way up to my professional career kicked off in web development, web design, which was sort of a transfer of my skills in the printing world. And then over time, as the web world got specialized, I became more of a manager.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was more of a generalist and not a specialist. I didn't want to be a programmer. I didn't want to be just a designer. So then the management role kind of just developed over time. And through some of my other careers, including a stint at Starbucks Corporation, I took those management roles and got closer to marketing, and just kind of had a real interest and a bit of a knack for some communications, marketing, things like that. But that undertone throughout that whole time frame was I'm interested in events. I'd always been involved in things like Iditarod or the Ferrandi Festival in Alaska. To a lesser degree, motorsports events, but then personally was involved in things like autocrossing and off-roading and things like that. So this just taken many, many years to get to the point where I am now, where there was a culmination of skill sets of design, creative, communications, marketing talent, business development, product development, owning and failing at businesses, owning and succeeding at businesses. And that's all kind of made this strange mold that just happened to land where now I can take some of my interest in the competitive motorsport world and merge that together with just, a couple of decades of experience in, a very wide and varied background.
Yeah, I like that. I'm glad that you went through that. We were talking a little bit in the pre-interview where part of what I like to capture in the first round here is the person's background. Like, why do we care? Why should we listen to this person who's talking to us, over this podcast? And I like the way that you kind of went through that. Like, I got this diverse background, been doing all these different things, and I think that helps people connect, especially from the sponsorship standpoint as a rider or a racer or, a weekend warrior, whatever you want to call it. There's a lot of those things that they end up doing, right? You have to have a little bit of knowledge of how do businesses work. You have to have a little knowledge of content creation, especially nowadays. There's an expectation around, getting into live videos and getting into, social media strategies and just in general understanding the marketing practices in motorsports. So I am glad that you've kind of gone through a number of those different things. You can offer that perspective. You know this enough about the show that I love getting different perspectives from people on the show, and this is a way to get it kind of all in one package. One thing though I wanted to just pull out though is just we talked about in the pre-interview a little bit is your podcast show / platform / network from earlier on in Alaska. Can you just touch on that really quickly, and then we'll move to the next question?
Sure, for sure. So let me set the stage of the time frame. So between what I was doing. So even though I was working in other professional careers, I always had that sort of, side hustle or that other thing that I was interested in.
Mm-hmm.
And I had maintained that website for a long time, for about a decade. I bought dogsled.com from an ISP that I had once worked for many years in web development. And I bought dogsled.com for $1 when that company was sold to someone else. And I just kept it alive because it was fun. It was a good test bed just to kind of, hone my skills in web design and development, dabble in live streaming, dabble in podcasting, video production and all that kind of stuff. So what happened was I was actually out of state at the time. I was living in Seattle area. I was out of Alaska at the time. And I caught wind of a guy who had a great audio podcast in Alaska. and he was doing pretty well in his own right. And at the time, I think it was Hayden Panettiere. She was an actress on Lost or whatever it was. It was the superheroes.
Heroes.
I forgot the name of that.
Heroes.
Yeah. So
I love that show, by the way. I loved it.
So she happened to be up in Alaska, and he had been doing mostly audio, but he caught up with her at some event. I think it was like a maker fair or something. And this a guy named Scott Sloan had met up with her and shot a video. And he thought, well, what the heck? I'll post this video. It was wildly successful. And he and I just been communicating on doing some audio, maybe some video stuff around Iditarod, because I was still running this dogsled.com website that was covering mushing events, including like the Bear Grease and Duluth. And it was just a place for me to play. Well, that was a success for him. I said, hey, I'm thinking about coming back to Alaska and doing some other stuff. What do you say we join forces? I've got some skill sets in business and other things that I could bring to the table. Plus, I have connections in Alaska in the travel industry and some friends and people who are engaged in that. And so what the genesis was, we came together and started just video podcasting. So this is YouTube channel. Mm-hmm. You kind of had to build like you've done, you had to build your own audience. You had to distribute it through a platform. We weren't using Libsyn at the time, but we had another host that we were using. But, you're running through iTunes and all that stuff. So it started off, he really just did these hikes. So we'd take these really interesting, iconic hikes, film the whole thing. He was the host of the show. And that was doing pretty well. Then I said, well, let's add a little more to this. We need to stretch our legs and really highlight Alaska. So it kind of became the online Alaska magazine video show that people would subscribe to. And we got our actual subscriber downloads, which were measured downloads. Mm-hmm. We had got to that point where we were pushing a couple 100,000 subscribers and measured downloads every month. Well, now we're actually getting better distribution than the actual Alaska magazine. So this is when I started leaning into the business side and started, putting deals together with Alaska Airlines, the Alaska Airlines Visa card from Bank of America, started partnering with other brands. And we just traveled all over Alaska and shot videos. So it was a great experience. We didn't make lots and lots of money. We had just started getting there. Mm-hmm. And it took several years to get to that point. But it was a lot of lessons learned on, distributing content, creating content, building an audience, leveraging that audience for monetizing it. And then unfortunately, as these things sometimes happen, he had a different vision than I had. He was a 51% owner of the entity. It kind of went back to being much more just hiking and maybe some photography stuff. I wanted to take it down much more of an adventure travel and get other hosts and other brands and kind of build a real network. We had rebranded Alaska HD TV, like high definition. Mm-hmm. We were doing just epic content based on the budget we had. It was pretty amazing. So that was a cool experience that lasted for about 3 years. And again, all of that skill and experience still transfers over to where I am today. Having, I have the ability to get in, I can edit video. I know how to distribute it. I know how to host it. I know how to, obviously the platforms and the channels may have changed, but the foundation's still very relevant to the world that I live in today.
Yeah, definitely. I think that's just kind of a cool little thing. I didn't know that about you. So I just want to make sure that we touch base on that in this show. And a lot of this comes down to content creation too, right? That's, at heart, you're a content creator as well.
Oh, of course. I think that's a key part of a product that brands are looking for as we transition into the discussion about influencers and marketing and sponsorships and things like that. That's certainly one important element is the content that you produce. Like I said at the outset, not really patting myself in the back. So don't listen to me. I'm not important. But but the point I want to make is that without our team generating the content that we do with the sponsorships and the relationships and the influencers that we have, especially if you think about the AMSOIL as a brand, well, it's oil in a bottle, and it's got a technical specification, and we might be able to do a lab test or some other dyno test, but that's about as far as it goes. Mm-hmm. So without the content and the storytelling and the character development that we have you don't have a brand. You don't have excitement. You don't bring the name and the brand of your business to life without some sort of content.
That's exactly right. And just like what we did here, telling a story, right? That's what you're doing with your branding. That's what you're doing with sponsorship. You're telling that story. And speaking of that, though, what we're going to do, we're going to break for a minute and then thank the sponsors of this podcast, and we'll hop right back in and get into the details about sponsorship tactics and strategies. Safety is our overriding priority. I hear it all the time, but I have to ask myself, is it though? Is that the first thing we think of? Is that the first thing you think of? Over the past couple of years, we've seen the performance of production UTVs increase, somewhere around 350%. That means these machines give us a lot more opportunity to have fun and win races, but it also, unfortunately, gives us new opportunities to crash. And that's why we have partnered with Crash Addict Industries. The owner, Travis Pointer, became very accustomed to crashing early in his career. He saw it as inevitable, and he set out to make the process safer. With a passion for racing, welding, and engineering, Crash Addict Industries now produces full cage and other protection systems intentionally designed to protect you during an accident on the track. They also offer a line of human protection products through their vendors. Do this for me at this point. If you're racing with a stock cage right now, please go check out CrashAddict.com and at least just see what they have to offer. Even if you choose to go with a different company, please make safety your overriding priority.
What's up, everyone? This is Mike Pasquarella, founder of Desert Vets Racing. When the team goes racing, we always have our SolderWeld products with us. Keeping the cars in the fight is our number one concern. With SolderWeld, we can do that. SolderWeld is a leading company in the U.S. for aluminum repair. They specialize in radiator repair on the fly. If you're stuck in the middle of the trail or a race with a hole in your radiator, oil pan, or canister, or even an aluminum line, you can fix it right then and there in a matter of minutes with their AMSOIL aluminum repair rods and flux. It's the only complete and lasting fix in the off-road community. SolderWeld's new UTV off-road kits fit in every ride and are easy to access on the fly.
SolderWeld continues to make a huge positive impact on this industry. So I really encourage you, get in there now. Go to solderweld.us, check out their products, because this stuff is changing the game. Two questions I get continuously about this show and about sponsorship is, do I need my own website and do I need a resume? The answer is, in my opinion, yes to both, and that's why we partner with TopThePodium.com. Now, if you want to see an example of what a professional website and what a professional resume looks like, you got to check out TopThePodium.com. They did my website. The Sponsored Rider Club podcast website is sponsoredriderclubpodcast.com. That was created by Jeff Vanestall of TopThePodium.com. I think it's awesome. I get a lot of good feedback about it. And there's a number of other websites out there that Jeff has produced that are just phenomenal. So I think it's important in this world of social media where you have control of your content. That's what a website does. It gives you full control. We don't know what Facebook's going to do sometimes. We don't know what Instagram's going to do. We don't know what Twitter's going to do. So if we don't have that central location to direct people and house our content, there is some risk that we incur. So I strongly recommend getting a website, talking to TopThePodium.com. And then the resume, again, is massive. And if you want to stand out, get it done professionally. And honestly, it is one of the best ways to step up your game and present yourself in the best way possible. Family race team. Those are the first words that come to mind when I think of Bold Racing. And the next one is actually axles. Bold Racing is a premier distributor of GSP XTV axles. And if that wasn't cool enough, they just came out with an entirely new axle called the Revolution axle. It is a hollow tube axle. It's really cool. If you head over to their website, gspxtv.com, or you can find out more at boldracingltd.com, you can find out how this new axle technology works. So they are saying to view this as a fuse for your drivetrain. So the hollow tube CV axle twist technology actually increases the strength and reliability of the axle, and it also reduces stress on the drivetrain. Plus, honestly, it's super cool looking, and if people know me, they know that I really like cool looking stuff. So they come in this really cool gold color. Check it out. It's absolutely revolutionary. All right, welcome back. We are now getting into the meat of this podcast, and we've got a couple of topics I want to cover around the whole sponsorship tactics and strategies. Lots of good stuff here. I kind of going to start a little bit broad, going off of the content creator comments, the athletes, but in general, the sponsorship world, how is it changing right now? I mean, you've been a part of this for a while, and most recently in your current role, you're in it all the time. But what's changing? What are the things that our athletes and content creators need to be paying attention to?
That is very broad. The challenge, I think, with well, that's a hard question to answer because it's changing all the time. And I don't mean that to punt or deflect from the question. But what we're recognizing, at least currently, as we're evaluating and looking at our mix and what's important, I know we always harp on social media and the value of social media. I would say that social media is still just a delivery mechanism. Mm-hmm. It's just a channel. And I think, kind of hitting on content and storytelling, I think what brands, especially now, are hungering for and desperately need to differentiate themselves are relevant stories. So something that really has meaning to a particular audience. So this is where, the key word or the buzzword today is influencer marketing. Mm-hmm. Influencer marketing is not new. We've just given it a different name and tried to apply some meaning to it. But if you put somebody on the front of a Wheaties box, that's influencer marketing. Right, I mean, nothing's changed for decades and decades and decades when it comes to that. So I think more than ever, though, relevancy is the key. So you can't just go out and pick an iconic name or face and just slap it on something. I think we all know that authenticity, relevance, and sort of community connection is critical. So, and unfortunately, there's no quick fix. And I think this is the challenge that I see changing in the brand marketing, event marketing, influencer, sports marketing. All of this challenge is that it takes time. And unfortunately, most senior management, most upper level folks are fairly impatient. We live in this, especially in the United States, we live in this, it's all about the results. What are the earnings? What are the earnings? What are the earnings? What are the numbers? And I'm totally on board with measurement, which is also a very challenging topic. But the reality is, I think relationships are more important now, probably, than they ever have been. I think there's been eras where you could get away with the veneer, right? It's a funny commercial. It's really catchy. It's got good action. Or maybe you pick a really hot celebrity and you slap your affiliation with that. People don't buy that anymore. Right. And I think some of that's generational. Some of it, I think, is just the saturation. There's just so much content out there. People are looking for something that really appeals to them. So I'd say that's the key thing, is relevancy and authenticity, and then being able to deliver the right message or the right story in the right place at the right time. That's the hardest part, is to figure out that formula. And, I'll just be the first to admit that we make mistakes. I mean, we think we understand, we listen, we try to get out in the field. That's what my team does, is press the flesh, if you will, be out amongst the people and really get a sense of what they're looking for, what's important to them. And we still miss the mark. It's not delivered at the right time, or the message is off, or it's the wrong character. So I think more than ever, it's such a fragmented and such a divided media mix, and there's so much of it coming at everybody every day. Finding meaning in that sort of white noise is really the key to success going forward. And quite frankly, as much as that's all kind of revolving around all the media channels, I think a part of that relevancy and relationship, more and more, and I'm not just saying this to kind of support my role and my position, I generally think that if you're not in the field and talking to real people and engaging, the meaning is lost.
Mm-hmm.
And so more and more, I think it's going to be critical for brands to be experiential. And so that's probably still a bit of a buzzword, and some people put different meaning to experiential, but you have to be amongst the people, and or your ambassadors have to be amongst the people and really engaging. So it's lifetime relationship building, and it's not as easy as it once was in my mind, that you had, a small number of broadcast channels and even a couple of social media platforms that you could play on. It just continues to get fragmented exponentially. So real relationships, I think, are what's changing, and if you don't have that, you're gonna really struggle.
Yeah, it's almost like going back to the basics. If you look at the social media boom, I guess, or just maybe even the podcast boom. I mean, you were talking about the show that you were working with. That was what, mid to late 2000s. Podcasts were still relatively new. I mean, even now, some people don't know how to use podcasts properly, but there's a million podcasts out there. I mean, if I want to learn about how to make, a special type of noodle that's only part of Southwest Kentucky, there's a podcast about this noodle. And,
right,
exactly, you know what I mean? It's there. Actually, I should check this, and maybe it is. But it's like what you said before about the saturation. I think that's, from my perspective, what's changing right now is overcoming the extreme saturation of just media platforms. And I think it's coming down to, something else you said is what I'm going to call extreme targeting. This micro, you can micro target your audience now with these influencers. So you have the person who's this, just massively into these special Southwest Kentucky noodles. If you want to sell the sauce that goes with these noodles, you get in front of this influencer and you're going to sell some noodles in Southwest Kentucky. That's just, or you're going to sell the sauce. It's
right.
But you have that option now. And that is, I think that's pretty cool. I think that's something that's really exciting. Just the challenge is even knowing where to start. A lot of people ask me that question and say, where do I start? What do I do first? And I'm like, I don't know.
Right.
I don't know yet.
Right.
We gotta just listen to every single one of episodes and then start there. I don't know. It's I think that's the challenge, is trying to figure out where to start and how to overcome this overwhelming saturation.
Yeah, it's hard to break through. I mean, look at all of your major media, channels, and those that used to have, just enormous weight, especially in the broadcast world. I mean, they are scrambling for what's the content, what's the breakthrough, what's the, what's the live show, what's the thing that's going to get people hooked. And I think the fact of the matter is that people are relatively fickle. They move quickly. They switch gears quickly. They, but except for say in the sports world, people tend to be a little more linear. They like their thing. They stick to their thing.
Yeah.
They like, if you're into dirt bikes, man, you're into dirt bikes, and that doesn't typically flip overnight. People a little bit more loyal, which is what's interesting about motorsports marketing, is while it's a little bit niche-y and it's a little bit, sometimes hard to find through the sort of just white noise of all the content that's out there, people are extremely loyal. But this gets back to my point about relevance and specifically relationships, because now more than ever, people are completely bombarded with messages all the time. So they're relatively numb to messages, and they're going to sniff it out really quick if you're just trying to sell them something. And so that's the trick, is how to find an influencer who already has the trust of an audience, who then you have a relationship with your brand authentically, so that they're not selling. They're just telling you, hey, I associate with this brand because I like them. They fit with me. It serves its purpose. It has some value in my life. That sells more than ever than sort of a spec sheet or, some sort of glitzy, cool, big ad where you spend lots of money on some, CGI. That's, I think, again, gets down to, like you said, back to basics. It's about relationship. It's word of mouth. It's It's having a conversation about who you are and what you do, not just forcing it down their throat or trying to baffle them with something humorous. It doesn't hurt sometimes to be fun and do goofy stuff, but it's not necessarily going to convert into a sale or any long-term relationship with someone just because, you made a funny beer commercial.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
The fact of the matter is you're still going to go buy the microbrew and laugh at the Bud Light commercial. That's how it works.
Yeah. No, that's a very good point.
So yeah, I mean, I feel like it's always changing. The platforms are always changing, and you just have to be nimble. And this applies to both sides. The brands are trying to figure it out, and those who are racers, those who are looking for sponsorship, kind of backs to the first part of this conversation is that, having a little diversity and knowing a little bit about, media mix, knowing a little bit about how to be well-spoken, how to hold just a conversation with real people. Mm-hmm. It doesn't have to be on social media. It could be at a race and you're having a great conversation with someone and you're that ambassador and an influencer right then and there. So every opportunity, there's an opportunity in every conversation. Is kind of what I wanted to get at. So, yeah. and they're all meaningful. The hardest part about all this, and this is the hard part that the number crunchers don't like, is that how do I measure that? Mm-hmm. If I'm a dirt bike racer and I'm having a great conversation with a fan, and you just naturally say something positive about the helmet that you wear because it's so comfortable and you love it. I mean, that goes really, really far, but that helmet manufacturer and the marketing team that manages that helmet is never going to get a direct attribution back to that. Right. And that's difficult. So those are challenges. Just so, when sponsored riders, for example, mm-hmm. are befuddled and frustrated by the process, guess what? So are we. Mm-hmm. It's not that the brands have it all figured out and we have all the answers. I think everyone struggles to, how do you know if it's working? And, obviously sales matter, but there's a lot of that relationship stuff that's intangible and it's very difficult to measure, but so critical.
That just made me think of something. I won't share who brought this up, but, someone from the audience reached out to me and they were just asking me a couple of questions about, a deal that they have with one of their sponsors and how they help promote the brand. And essentially they use a promo code, right? There's some certain code that they'll hand out to people that are in their audience. Says, hey, use this promo code and you'll get whatever the percentage is off. Let's just say 20% off. And they were saying, like, this is really cool, but why? I don't understand why I have it. Well, so they can track, right? They can understand, the business can now say, every time this person, does something with this code, what conversion do I see on sales? Like, how many of these promo codes actually lead to an end sale? And then I can attribute to that influencer. I know what they did. The challenge, though,
exactly,
it just to what you were saying before, sometimes it can come across as selling. It's like, well, okay, now you're just pushing this promo code. I mean, trust me, I love it. And I'm a data guy too. I love it. And I'm not saying it's wrong by any means, but that's the challenge. You're like, I want to track it. I want to get this information, but now it's coming a little bit more across like I'm trying to sell something, which, we do want to sell it. We want to make the sale, but we don't want it to feel like we're trying to sell it. We don't want it to feel like we're trying to make the sale. And, that's the conundrum there of, like, how do you find that sweet spot where you track what you can and you can show the return on investment that you want to, but without it feeling like that's what you're doing.
Yeah, and that's what I wanted to, at least point out to your listeners is that, I mean, if anybody else comes on the show that's in a position of, like mine and tells you that they've got it all figured out, they're lying. The reality is, well, no, I mean, because, the media mix changes, the needs and desires of your management changes as far as measurement. It is a bit of an art, and this is not to kind of deflect or take away any value from data, because I'm all about it. I want to know. I want to know as much as I can. I want to have good information. We all do. But if you're not looking at both pieces of the relationship as well as the ROI, one of the two is going to fail.
Right.
So
right.
It is a very fine line. of understanding, okay, I'm getting pretty good attribution. I can track back a certain amount of impressions or a certain amount of conversions or a certain amount of sales. Those are all important metrics. But I also have to kind of measure the intangible, which is, again, you've got to be out in the field. You've got to connect with people and see your influencers in action, and interact with the real world, the real consumer in the world. And does it fit your brand identity? Does it fit your sentiment? Does it fit the culture? Does it fit the environment? Again, this all gets back to relevancy. And it's a very tough business. And again, I think it's largely relationship driven. I mean, I've been at it for a long, long time. And from my experience, it's been the relationship is so key. If that's not working, even with high attribution, if there's a giant disconnect, then it's disingenuous and people feel like they're being sold to. And it can be even more of a net negative. You may have the most popular person today in media or culture, but that can work against you if there's not an authentic connection with the person selling your product or representing your product and the people who want it or you might attract. So it's a very so relationships really matter as much as ROI and measurement does. And trust me, we do both. I mean, it's a I think about this stuff, unfortunately, more than I ought to, 24 hours a day. I found myself waking up at, 11 o'clock. I just went to bed. I wake up again, and then I'm like, what, because it's just a burning in my mind about a different approach, a different way to message, a different person that might have some good fit for us. So it's tough stuff, and I wish there was a magic bullet, and I wish I could tell all of your listeners, like, here's the perfect formula. I can certainly, as we go further into this conversation, give examples of things that have been successful, give examples of things that haven't worked well. We can certainly explore that as we dig deeper into, making it work, if you will.
Yeah, no, that's really good. This made me think of something. I read a lot of books, and I'm reading one right now. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before. It's called The Goal. I think it was written in the 80s. Is that something? Are you familiar with that? The Goal? It's a manufacturing.
That one doesn't ring a bell, no.
Yeah, it's like a manufacturing-based book, but it's really cool because it's still like a personal development, a nonfiction book, but they've written it in a narrative style, so it actually is a story to it. But either way, one of the purposes of it is, they talk about this manufacturing plant, and there's all of these metrics and all these different things they're driving to, and they've got these cost per part, and they got these efficiency metrics. But the plant manager is like, gosh, we're struggling though. Like, we're not actually making money, but our efficiencies are going up. What is wrong here? But basically, what he finds out in this journey is that, he's got this amazing data, but he's measuring the wrong things. He's pulling levers to things that don't actually matter. And it takes him throughout this entire book to understand, like, maybe I need to question what I'm measuring, not stop measuring. But I just need to question it. Is this even the right thing? And then once he made some tweaks, he figured out what the true goal was, which is the name of the book. Then he was able to make his plant profitable and all this good stuff. But I don't know. That's a
really good. That's a really good point. I think I'm glad you said that, because one of the things that I've experienced at AMSOIL and other brands. I mean, I've worked for Starbucks. I've worked for telecom. I've run my own businesses, and you're always looking at measurements, right? What's working, what's not working. The other thing that people fall into a trap fairly often is they take what I like to say, they take a data point and make it the data point. And there's a distinction. A data point is just a collection of information that you then compare against other data points. So you have to look at the whole. You have to understand the context, and to your point, what is the objective? What is the goal? And it's all too easy to just kind of fall into a single metric. Well, it's the number of impressions, or it's just how many views did we get, or how many followers do I have? These things are just a piece of the fabric of the whole story, and I think that's one of the fallacies that still gets perpetuated a little bit. Not so much today. People are starting to figure it out. You can't just say, "Oh, well, I get X number of views, so that means I must be doing well." people are starting to understand that there's more to that. And some of those are intangible and some of those are measurable. But measuring the right thing certainly matters, and also not getting myopic and focusing on one data point and making it kind of the only measurement point that you base your value on.
Mm-hmm. No, that's good. And a minute ago, you kind of said, hey, what if we get into a couple examples, things have worked well or maybe didn't go so well? I mean, I'm comfortable if you want to get into that now, that'd be probably a great transition.
Sure. I think some time ago I was invited to, strangely enough, when I was still at the Iron Dog, I was invited to speak at Northern Idaho Tourism Conference. They want me to come and be a keynote speaker. And I thought, what the heck am I going to talk about?
Mm-hmm.
And I later found out their interest was they wanted to start another snowmobile event in Northern Idaho. So that's why they were kind of picking my brain. But really what I discovered as I was thinking of, like, what are some successful models and things that have worked? And I put together a presentation on how teams are better than partners.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the title of this. And what I discovered over time in working with brand marketing, especially around sponsorships, I've been on both sides of the equation. I've been the guy begging for sponsorships and trying to raise money, and I've also been the guy who's been trying to vet and select and pick and then award sponsorships. So what I've learned over time is that some of the best successes come from developing a team. And what I mean by that is finding brands, individuals, and putting them together in more than two. So a lot of times if you just have I'll give you an example. So Iron Dog is a classic. It's a smaller example, but it's a good one. So I could just start a sponsorship relationship with, say, Monster Energy drink. And I had that. I, got them to support what we were doing and put on X Games style freestyle shows and close downtown anchors and do all this cool stuff. But it wasn't going to be successful just by throwing up banners and doing cool stuff together. What I found is that you have to this is where it gets into understanding business. Take a walk in the shoes of that person that you're trying to work with. What do they care about? What are they after? Well, obviously they're looking for awareness, but if I'm Monster, I'm looking for people to walk into some location and buy my product, right? And I'm looking for a place to do that. Well, I'm an outdoor snowmobile event. I don't have a place to sell Monster Energy drinks. Makes no sense at all.
Yeah.
I mean, I can give them away. We can sample, we can throw up banners and do cool social media stuff, but that's not going to really move their product. But I had a relationship with Holiday Station stores, which you might know from the Midwest.
Yeah.
Holiday Station stores were growing pretty well in the Alaska market. And so I approached them and said, hey, how would you like to get involved? Blah, 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 kind of sell a package. And what I found was the combination of, hey, we have a cool event, iconic, draws a lot of attention. We can do a promotion together. Let me marry you guys up. So now it's Iron Dog, it's Monster Energy, and it's Holiday Station stores. And by having three people working together, the accountability factor goes up exponentially. Because now we're all involved, right? I can't, if it's just me and Monster, I can say, well, sorry, I didn't have enough volunteers. I couldn't get your banner up. If it was just me and Holiday, it'd be the same thing. Well, sorry, we weren't able to make this work. And it's kind of like having a workout buddy, but even better is if you had two workout buddies. It's like if you had two workout buddies, guess what? You can't call the one buddy and say, I'm not feeling it this morning. The other guy says, I'm with you, I'm not feeling it.
Yeah.
So there's going to be that third one, the other one, who's going to be like, you guys are full of it.
Right,
we said we were going to do this. Let's go do this. And so I gave several examples kind of like that where teams are more valuable than partners. And the same really does apply if you're a sponsored rider. You're looking for some sponsorships. Think about the relationships between the brands that you're already working with and other brands that might mesh well. I do this all the time in reverse in my current position. So, for example, we have Brad Lovell. Great. We've had Brad Lovell as an off-road racer for many, many years. I don't make decisions about where we're going to go with Brad in a vacuum. I'm AMSOIL. I'm your number one sponsor. We're going to go do this kind of racing. I don't do that. I look at the whole field. I look at, okay, what are the other relationships? Who are the other teams that we can partner with and really build strength? So, for example, BF Goodrich. We mesh well. We work together. That's a brand he works with. So I want to make sure that we have conversations. Are we a team? Are we all pointing in the same direction? Are we aligned? Can you leverage what I'm doing? Can I leverage what you're doing? The same applies if you're on the other side of this equation. Is if you can be a good matchmaker and build a team around your own brand or your own sponsorship, you're going to find much greater success than just kind of picking people off one at a time. Well, I need an oil sponsor, or I need a helmet, or I need, whatever, a clothing. So the alignment, you see this. I mean, I think you and I talked about this a little bit offline. Is like, clothing brands, for example. We work with Climb, and there's a very specific reason. It doesn't mean we don't work with other brands. We certainly do in other venues. But I'm looking for alignment. I'm looking for teams. I'm trying to build a group effort because the group effort is going to net a much better result for all of us involved. And there's a little bit of an art to that, but that's something that I think all people looking for sponsorship, if you're really, really smart at it, you'll learn to figure out what is the character, personality of the brand that I want to work with, and does it mesh well with the brands that I'm already working with? And even better, if you want to really see success, is be that matchmaker. Be the one who says, hey, you know what? I'm working with this brand. They like me. We do really well together. Guess what? We've seen you do these other things with other people. How about you guys talk? It's not about me right now. And that's another really great tactic. Don't make it about you. Don't say, well, I'm a 5-time champion and I get on podiums and blah. I don't care. I mean, I do, but if you come to me and say, I can help you solve a problem I have a partner who might work really well with you and we can build a team together. And here's how we're going to get more reach, and we're going to do some cool things together, and we're going to, activate around the same events. We might do some content, do some video production together. There's some shared costs there. Ooh, that's really appealing to me. Not all brands are that way, but brands are smarter, learning really quick. You can't go it alone. Right. I can't be all things to all people all the time. But if I'm working with someone like Method Wheels, I'm working with someone like Climb, I'm working with someone, from, and of course we're in every imaginable, anything that burns gas, we're involved in it. So
yeah.
Sometimes those marriages don't line up, and that's okay. Sometimes they fall apart. That's okay. But I would say that's probably the best example I can give, and leading into a little bit of advice of how to be a really powerful seller is to be a very powerful matchmaker. And that's a great way to get started. You've got one brand that loves you and works with you, and you can find a way to build a team with another brand and bring value through that, make that relationship, make that introduction. I think you'll see great success. That's an example, and some advice all in one long-winded conversation.
No, that was perfect. I think it's a big deal. Just look at the side of a snowmobile or a side of a race car, and you see these different logos next to each other. There is a lot of potential there for these companies to start working together. I mean, even with this show, right? If you look at, I send out just kind of like a performance update at the end of each month to all my sponsors. Well, you now have a direct connection with the other sponsors that are on my show. You could hit reply all and then have an instant connection with those people. And the same goes for any sponsored rider or racer out there. You have the opportunity to connect these brands, and that can become way more powerful. Actually, another way too is if that brand, say they're resharing some of your content or you're creating content specifically for them, well, now your other sponsor is going to be benefiting as well, especially if the target markets line up. So going back to your example with BF Goodrich, right? BF Goodrich and AMSOIL, I think, you're both with Bryce Menzies. So like if BF Goodrich promotes Bryce Menzies, right, they're going to do that. They're going to take advantage of that opportunity just the same as you're going to take advantage of the opportunity to promote Bryce Menzies. And he's taking the advantage of the opportunity to promote both you and BF Goodrich. Great. Now we've got three big players,
Well, not to take the wind out of your sails, but he switched brands.
Oh, dang. Well, where you were, right? In the past.
Right. Well, and actually to that point, though, what's funny is that's exactly what I was trying to do very intentionally.
Yeah.
Was trying to get all that alignment. So we actually have, Brad Lovell,
Yep.
we had Scott Douglas, and then we had Bryce Menzies. And just about the time we got them all aligned, then Bryce went with Toyo.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not the end of the world. We still have alignment with some of his other brands. So all is not lost, but so it doesn't always work. It doesn't always last, but when you can build those, that momentum together, it still has great value.
Yeah.
And, so like I said, not to shoot that one out of the water, but it is, but that's okay. And so, I mean, it's all, and that's another important lesson, I think, for your listeners is that, you know what, even when you think it's a perfect alignment and a perfect marriage, sometimes circumstances happen.
Yeah.
And you can't take that, you can't take it personal. You can't get too frustrated. You have to be very resilient. I mean, it's just like competing, you get up and you train harder and you do it again. And if you apply that same drive to succeed, drive to compete to relationship building and understanding the industry and understanding the businesses and understanding those partnerships, you'll be successful. Mm-hmm. And it's just like racing. You don't just show up one day, throw your leg over a bike and win a race. It doesn't work that way.
Right.
You do have to work at it. So, sometimes people get lucky and everything aligns and it stays that way for, 10 years. Other people struggle and a lot of times it's not your fault. I mean, a lot of times, the sentiment of the brand has changed. People want to go a different direction. Sometimes there's just personal conflicts that, somebody's not getting along. So it's it's just not a guaranteed thing that you're going to always get that alignment, but I can tell you when you do get it working and you can maintain it, you can keep those relationships going. That you're just going to have much better success at not only maintaining those brands that you have working with you, but attracting others. Because if they see that success, and to your point, there's a shared investment in content development. One time AMSOIL does the production, the next time BFG does the production, the next time it's Fox Shocks. We're all winning. We're all getting a piece of that action. By sharing what you do as a racer, to our respective audiences, and we're all benefiting from it. So the smart brands figure that out, and some brands get really weird and competitive, and I want my logo to be 10% larger than the other guy, and that can sometimes create friction too. Mm-hmm. And again, that's not the fault of the racer. Again, circumstances happen that are out of your control. But I don't know. I think still the relationship thing is just an important part all the way around.
Definitely. Well, I think we covered a lot of really good content here so far. People don't always see this, right? I take some pictures while I do these recordings, but I take a ton of notes. So I'm noted out right now, which is good stuff. But I kind of want to start closing things out at the finish line. I want to wrap things up. If you had to leave the audience with one thing, say they forgot everything else that we just talked about, what's one thing they need to take away from this conversation?
Boy, that's a tough one. This sounds a bit cliche, but I would say don't give up.
Yeah.
So persistence is key. Now, if I was going to, give a sentiment of positivity, like where it's not just like, oh, okay, yeah, work hard, I get that.
Yeah.
I'd say that the other really key tip, if I was going to leave one thing behind, would be focus on the relationships. Mm-hmm. You've got to really connect at an authentic, real level. You'll make that breakthrough. It may take time, but so that's the persistence. But focus on the relationship, not on the dollar, not on the what you get out of it. But if you focus on that, and any real relationship is a two-way street, so you need to understand what they need. You understand what I need. You come to me, and you solve my problem. I'm gonna be all about fighting for you to give you a sponsorship.
Mm-hmm.
That's how that works.
Perfect. So Kevin, what's the best way for people listening to connect with you?
Well, with me and AMSOIL, it's pretty easy. Racing at AMSOIL.com is kind of our catch-all inbox for people, interested in sponsorships, influencer deals, things of that nature. That goes through my team, and we look at everything. The other one, quite frankly, we've been pivoting to is we've been starting to use Hookit quite a bit. So
yeah.
I'd highly recommend people use Hookit. Even if traditionally it's dirt bike guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
But are mostly, and some snowmobile. I don't care what you are. If you're an influencer, race car driver, whether that's flat track motorcycles, whether that's NASCAR, whatever it may be, Hookit's a good place because it's just a good clearinghouse. It's a good tool for managing things. So I'd say you can send us a direct note, and if you say, hey, I really want to talk to Kevin, you can say that too, and I'll get the email.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, hey, I really appreciate you taking the time to chat tonight. I think that we covered a lot of good content. Like I said, I got a lot of good notes here. I'm really excited to get this one out there, but, we got to end it now, so I'm going to leave it with this. Have fun and ride safe. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Sponsored Rider Club podcast, which is powered by AMSOIL. Make sure you follow us on social media. Pay specific attention to our Facebook page. That's where we do our live shows. To get some insider access to upcoming guests, go ahead and check out the Sponsored Rider Club on Facebook. A special thanks goes out to the sponsors of this show, AMSOIL, SolderWeld, Bold Racing, TopThePodium.com, and Crash Addict Industries. And I also want to shout out some of our other partners, GSP XTV, MBRP, HMK USA, and Stud Boy Traction. I look forward to serving you again next week. Until then, have fun and ride safe.